Hi, my name is Steven and welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be talking to you about how to deal with disappointment, how to bounce back faster. We all deal with disappointments at different times in our lives, there's just no escaping it. Disappointment can come in various forms, like romantic rejections, personal failures, or business failures. Or disappointments can slowly build up over a long period of time. Examples of that are usually long-term injuries and dwelling over what happened or what could have gone better. Everyone deals with it in their own fashion, and some are more successful at bouncing back faster than others. How we choose to bounce back from disappointment can help us recover in the future and make us more resilient. As a person who's gone through many disappointments himself, I know how crucially important it is to grow from your disappointments and to bounce back even faster. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about my tips on dealing with disappointment and my general thoughts. And before we start, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, share with your friends, hit that notification bell if you like this content. And here we go. So when I'm talking about bouncing back from disappointment, I'm talking about the moment or situation where you're feeling upset and down. When you're in the throes of dealing with disappointment, it can be really hard to dig yourself out of it and feel like you want to move forward. But it's crucial to implement these tips when you're in the throes of feeling disappointment, because then it'll help you to bounce back faster. So now let's talk about my tips on dealing with disappointments. Number 1, take time to process. When you're going through a disappointing situation, take some time off to think about it and reflect on the incident. The timing of this may depend on your circumstances, but always be sure to take some time to process it. This can be as short as an hour or as long as you need to get over the disappointment. This is an important step because you need to process what happened and to make sure that you can get it out of your system. This time can be mainly used to settle you down emotionally. Whether or not you use that time to vent to others, cry, or to just simply spend your time alone. The point is to think through whatever disappointment you went through and be okay with it. It can be very easy to skip through this step because we don't have too much time in our lives, but I assure you this is an important process. Because if you don't deal with it and process it as soon as you can, it can come out in various different ways that you might not like in the future. For me, I usually gauge the severity of the disappointment and use that as my stick to gauge how long I need to process it. For some larger disappointments in my life, I've taken weeks to try to digest and figure it out. So when you encounter disappointments in your life, be sure to take time to process it. Your future will thank you for it. Number 2, understand what happened. After you processed your disappointment, go through and understand why it occurred in the first place and what led up to it. Whereas the first part of the tip is really to focus on your emotional well-being, the second is to really logically understand what happened. Disappointments can come in many different ways. Sometimes it's your fault or sometimes it's external and not your fault. Figuring out which one it is and what were the circumstances can really help you resolve it. And it can help you prevent it the next time something like that occurs as well. For me, a classic example of this was when I was dating in my early 20s. I had gone through a lot of rejections, and each time I had to think through and process what just happened. It really hit my confidence hard. But I needed to take the time and process it emotionally so I can work it out and disconnect it from myself. Because once I was able to calm down from the emotional aspect of it, I was able to try to resolve it logically. This meant that I had to understand what happened and what occurred to get to my disappointment in the first place. So part of my recovery from these disappointments were to understand really what happened and create a plan on what I could do better in the future. Number 3, accept what you can. After you understand what caused the disappointment, seek to accept the parts of yourself and the situation that were out of your control. When we look at our disappointment, we can find things that were in our control and external circumstances that weren't in our control. Things that were out of our control can inflict a lot of pain on us. But we have to choose to accept those things and move on from it as best as we can. Even though it's easier to blame, deflect, or scapegoat whatever caused your disappointment, acknowledging and accepting those factors that weren't in your control can make it easier for you to recover from it. For me, I remember many instances where I was dating somebody and they weren't interested in Asians or that I was too short. These were things that I could not control for the life of me, and I just had to accept those circumstances. It initially hurt, but there was no alternative. I couldn't change those things. I had to accept who I was. This step can be really challenging because sometimes the true causes of our disappointments can be very hard for us to accept. But when you can accept and move forward from those things that were out of your control, then you'll be more resilient in the future because of it. Number 4, plan to recover. One of the best ways to bounce back fast after a disappointment is to create a plan of action. Because when you create a plan of action, you're triggering your mind to do something about the situation, which means that you're actively taking charge, and that motivates your mind to get out of your funk. And because you already understand what happened to cause your disappointment, creating a plan of action is even easier. So for example, if you have trouble dating, then creating an action plan to shore up your weaknesses will be a good start. Or if you have good strengths, then work towards enhancing your strengths. Or for example, if you have a failure at work, creating an action plan to do better next time is a good course of action. When you take control of the situation, you give yourself power to combat that disappointment. You empower yourself and you give yourself the confidence to move forward and not just be helpless. So when you suffer through disappointment and you emotionally work through it, create an action plan for yourself. Whether that plan is to resolve the disappointment so that it doesn't happen again, or it could be a vacation to get away from it all. Have something actionable to work on so your mind can redirect its energies. And number 5, create a new outlook. In each of the disappointments in our lives, there's many different ways we can deal with what occurred. One of the ways to deal with it is to seek another path. Say you were interviewing for a new job and you didn't get it. You were initially disappointed, but as you reflected on it, you realized you really didn't want the job. You just wanted it for the money or prestige. And ultimately, you were grateful that you didn't switch jobs. This is an example of reframing the disappointment into something more neutral. It is a key factor in bouncing back quicker from disappointment. And once we're able to see it from a different perspective, we can change our minds on it. It might not be a disappointment to us anymore. That reframing can also help us lessen the pain and disappointment in the future. For me, when I was turned down or rejected by people, I had to reframe the situation. And instead of beating myself up, I would tell myself they're just not the right ones for me. This was a simple change, but it altered my perspective on dating completely. Or when I tried a new hobby and I wasn't good at it, I wouldn't tell myself that I sucked and I would never do it again. I would tell myself that learning something new takes time and I'll eventually get good at it. So reframing your disappointment is the key to bouncing back faster. So here are some of my general thoughts on bouncing back from disappointment. Although I didn't explicitly say it, don't try to drown out your disappointments with alcohol, drugs, or just simply ignoring it. The thing is, if you did do that, you wouldn't learn the lessons from that disappointment or what caused it. And over time, you might end up repeating those mistakes and causing another disappointment that was similar. Processing it and moving on from it is ultimately what makes us more resilient in the future. Because resilience is built on our ability to withstand disappointments and hardships. With each disappointment, we learn a little bit more about ourselves, and over the long term, we can learn a lot from it. And we also have the ability to bounce back from it quicker and quicker the more disappointment experience we have. So over a long period of time, you can truly be a very resilient person to disappointment. So trust the process when you're going through a difficult time and know that you'll be better for it in the future. So those are my tips from bouncing back faster from disappointment. It's certainly not easy when you're first starting out or never truly reflected on your own disappointments before. But I truly believe that the more tools you have in your toolbox, the more resilient you'll be towards disappointment. And will be more prepared the next time disappointment happens to us in our lives. No one really gives you a guide or handbook on how to deal with disappointments. Everybody has to kind of figure it out on their own. And this really is inefficient because we don't have a good process on how to deal with disappointments and bouncing back from it fast. So as someone who has gone through a lot of disappointments, I've compiled as many tips and strategies I can to deal with it. And I've really taken these tips and strategies and helped me manage and deal with disappointments as they come up. This process has not only helped me through the tough times, but it also made me a more resilient person because of it. So the main keys of this video are to take time and reflect, accept what you can, and to create a new outlook. So thank you for watching. Please leave me a comment down below on how you deal with disappointment and has that made you a more resilient person as a result. And I'll see you next time.